She loved her, but the woman she trusted most had a secret that could destroy everything. How far would someone go when love turns into obsession? Tonight, one quiet apartment hides a web of lies, a vanished woman, and a betrayal so dark. No one saw it coming, and when the truth finally comes to light, nothing and no one will ever be the same. Evelyn Harper had mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight. At 32, she lived alone in a narrow Portland apartment where rain tapped the windows like unanswered questions. Her days were spent editing documentaries for other people's tragedies, trimming grief into neat timelines, never allowing her own emotions to bleed onto the screen. Friends described her as kind, reliable, forgettable. Evelyn preferred it that way. She had learned early that loving quietly meant surviving. Her childhood had been a series of half-finished conversations and closed doors, a home where silence felt safer than honesty. As an adult, she carried that instinct into every relationship, offering support without demands, affection without noise. Loneliness sat beside her each evening, familiar as a shadow. The night she met Lena Brooks began without intention. Evelyn stopped at a small art cafe after work, seeking warmth and anonymity. Lena was already there, laughing softly with the barista, her presence bending the room's attention without effort. She had dark hair pulled carelessly back and eyes that seemed to notice everything. When their gazes met, Lena smiled as if they shared a private understanding. Their conversation flowed with unsettling ease. Lena spoke about moving often, about never belonging anywhere for long. Evelyn listened, drawn to the vulnerability Lena wore like truth. When Lena asked about her work, she listened closely, as though Evelyn's quiet life mattered. The attention felt intoxicating, dangerous in its gentleness. They walked together into the damp night, shoulders brushing, neither acknowledging the electricity between them. Lena's voice lowered when she said she hated goodbyes. Evelyn surprised herself by asking for her number, her heart beating too loudly for someone who loved silence. Lena typed it in, fingers warm against Evelyn's skin. In the days that followed, messages arrived at all hours. Lena remembered small details, echoed Evelyn's fears, admired her restraint. It felt like being seen without exposure. Coffee turned into dinners, dinners into long walks where secrets hovered just beneath the surface. Evelyn didn't tell anyone. She didn't need to. This felt fragile, something that could shatter if named aloud. For the first time in years, Evelyn allowed herself to imagine a future shaped by another person's presence. She ignored the way Lena avoided certain questions, the careful pauses before answers. Love, she believed, required trust before proof. Evelyn noticed changes within herself that frightened her. She smiled more at her reflection, slept less, and waited for notifications like promises. At work, timelines blurred as Lena's voice replayed in her head, steady and reassuring. When doubts surfaced, Evelyn dismissed them as old scars speaking too loudly. She told herself that privacy was not secrecy, that intensity was not danger. Still, some nights, she sensed a careful distance in Lena's touch, a practiced empathy that felt rehearsed. Evelyn swallowed the unease, choosing hope over caution, unaware that choice had already been made. It would later haunt her, echoing in moments she could not undo, when truth arrived without mercy and love demanded a price she never imagined paying in full. That belief was tested one quiet evening when Evelyn unlocked her phone and saw a message from an unknown number. No greeting, no explanation, just a single sentence glowing on the screen. "You don't know who you just let into your life." The warning message lingered in Evelyn's mind like a bruise pressed too often. She reread it several times, searching for context, tone, intent. There was none, no follow-up, no number she could trace. By morning, she told herself it was a mistake or a cruel prank. Fear, she decided, was an old reflex. Lena deserved better than suspicion born from shadows. When Evelyn mentioned the message casually, Lena reacted with practiced calm. She smiled, brushing it off as jealousy or misunderstanding, her voice steady and warm. "People don't like seeing others happy," she said, squeezing Evelyn's hand. The reassurance worked. It always did. Lena had a way of turning doubt into guilt, making Evelyn feel ashamed for questioning something so beautiful. Lena began to share more of her past, each story carefully shaped. She spoke of a mother lost too young, of drifting between cities to escape pain, of lovers who betrayed her trust. Each confession came late at night, when defenses were low and intimacy felt sacred. Evelyn listened, absorbing every word, feeling chosen to hold such fragile truths. Lena cried softly during these moments, never too much, always just enough. But small inconsistencies slipped through the cracks. Dates shifted, cities changed, names blurred. When Evelyn asked gentle questions, Lena laughed lightly, blaming trauma and memory. "I don't like digging into the past," she said. "It hurts." Evelyn apologized for pushing, unaware she was being trained to stop asking. Their bond intensified quickly. Lena left clothes in Evelyn's apartment, claimed drawers, rearranged routines. She encouraged Evelyn to work from home, to cancel plans, to stay inside where it was safe. "I just want you to myself sometimes," Lena whispered, framing control as affection. Evelyn felt special, needed. She mistook isolation for intimacy. One evening, Evelyn searched for Lena online, curiosity masked as care. Social media profiles were scarce, oddly clean, as if scrubbed. A professional page listed Lena as a freelance consultant, vague and polished. No photos before 2 years ago. No comments from family, no history. The absence unsettled Evelyn more than any red flag might have. When she asked about it, Lena's expression hardened for a split second before softening. She explained she had deleted most of her past after a toxic breakup. "I wanted to disappear," she said quietly. Evelyn believed her. She wanted to. Love made disbelief feel cruel. Days passed, stitched together by routines that revolved around Lena's moods. When Lena was affectionate, the world felt lighter. When she grew distant, Evelyn panicked, desperate to restore balance. She didn't recognize the pattern forming, how quickly her emotional stability began depending on someone else's approval. Late one night, as Lena slept beside her, Evelyn's phone buzzed. A message notification flashed across the screen. Different number, same chilling tone. "She isn't who you think she is." Evelyn stared at the words, her heart pounding. She turned toward Lena, watching her peaceful face in the dark. For the first time, love didn't feel safe. It felt staged, like a performance she had been applauding without reading the script. Evelyn locked her phone, swallowing fear, unaware that the lies surrounding her were already tightening, preparing to pull her deeper into a truth far more dangerous than she could imagine.
Evelyn chose silence the way some people chose prayer. After the second warning message, she stopped mentioning Lena to anyone at all. Friends asked why she never came out anymore, why she canceled dinners and birthdays. Evelyn smiled through excuses, believing privacy protected what mattered. Lena encouraged it gently, praising Evelyn for being different from people who needed attention. Their relationship lived in enclosed spaces, dim restaurants, long drives at night, quiet rooms where curtains stayed closed. Lena said the world felt hostile, judgmental, unsafe. She spoke about past rejection with practiced pain, reminding Evelyn how fragile love could be. Evelyn absorbed those fears, making them her own. She began to feel responsible for Lena's safety, her comfort, her peace. The warnings returned sporadically, always from different numbers. Each message was brief, deliberate, unsettling. Evelyn deleted them immediately, ashamed of the relief she felt when Lena remained unaware. Part of her feared that acknowledging them would invite loss. Another part feared what they might reveal. Silence felt easier than truth. Lena filled the quiet with intensity. She planned spontaneous trips that never happened, made promises framed as destiny. She spoke about a future together without details, keeping it abstract enough to feel real but impossible to question. When Evelyn hesitated, Lena accused herself of being too much, turning doubt into sympathy. Evelyn reassured her again and again, unaware of how carefully the roles were being assigned. Evelyn's world narrowed, work suffered, sleep fractured. She checked her phone constantly, measuring her worth by response times and tone. Lena's affection came in waves, unpredictable but powerful. When it withdrew, Evelyn blamed herself, searching for invisible mistakes. Love no longer felt mutual, it felt earned. One evening, Evelyn suggested introducing Lena to a close friend. The room changed instantly. Lena's smile stiffened, eyes darkening just long enough to notice. She claimed she wasn't ready, that exposure terrified her. "Please don't push me," she whispered. Evelyn apologized, the guilt settling deep. The idea was never mentioned again. Weeks passed like this, stitched together by routine secrecy. Evelyn stopped asking questions altogether. She told herself that not everyone needed to be understood fully to be loved. Still, unease crept in during quiet moments, a sense that something vital remained just out of sight. At night, she replayed conversations, wondering why reassurance always felt temporary. The warnings echoed faintly in her memory, no longer sharp but impossible to silence. She began writing unsent notes in her phone, questions she was afraid to voice, doubts she hoped would dissolve with time. Each day felt carefully balanced, as if one wrong question could collapse everything she had built around Lena. She told herself this was what commitment looked like, sacrifice disguised as devotion. The idea that love required shrinking felt logical, even noble. Evelyn ignored the quiet resentment building beneath her loyalty, convincing herself that endurance meant maturity, not erasure. The more she hid, the more normal the hiding became, until secrecy itself felt like proof of love. Fear softened everything, blurring instinct, boundaries, and the warning signals entirely. It happened by accident. Evelyn left work early one afternoon, rain blurring the city into reflections. As she crossed a downtown street, laughter caught her attention. Across the cafe window, she saw Lena. Her hair was loose, her posture relaxed in a way Evelyn rarely saw anymore. Lena's hand rested on another woman's knee, fingers intertwined with familiarity. The woman leaned in close, smiling like she belonged there. Lena smiled back without hesitation. Evelyn froze, heart pounding, breath trapped in her chest. Lena looked happy, effortlessly so. The secrecy, the fear, the isolation suddenly shifted shape. Love in the shadows revealed its outline, and for the first time, Evelyn understood she might not be the only one living there. Evelyn didn't remember crossing the street. One moment she was frozen outside the cafe, the next she was walking away, rain soaking through her coat, her pulse roaring louder than the traffic. She didn't look back. If she had, she knew she might have walked inside, might have demanded answers she wasn't ready to hear. Instead, she went home and sat in the dark, replaying the image of Lena's smile like a wound reopening. Lena didn't call that night. When she finally did the next morning, her voice was calm, affectionate, unchanged. Evelyn listened, searching for cracks. When she asked, carefully, whether Lena had been downtown yesterday, there was a pause, brief, almost unnoticeable. Then Lena sighed, weary and wounded. She admitted she had run into an ex. "Her name is Claire," she said. "She won't let go." Lena painted Claire Morgan as obsessive, unstable, someone who refused to accept the end of a relationship. She said Claire followed her, engineered encounters, thrived on drama. Evelyn wanted to believe every word. The alternative felt unbearable. Lena sounded hurt, offended that Evelyn might doubt her. Guilt rushed in, familiar and heavy. Evelyn apologized before she realized she was doing it. 2 days later, Evelyn received a message request on social media. The profile picture showed a confident woman with sharp eyes and an unreadable smile. Claire Morgan. The message was short and direct. "We need to talk. She's lying to you." Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time before responding. They met in a quiet public park, daylight offering a sense of safety. Claire was nothing like Evelyn expected. She was composed, articulate, visibly cautious. She didn't insult Lena. She didn't exaggerate. She spoke in facts measured and restrained. Claire explained that she and Lena had been together for nearly a year. That Lena had promised exclusivity, a shared future, financial plans. When Evelyn's name surfaced accidentally, Lena claimed Evelyn was just a coworker. Claire's voice didn't shake as she spoke, but her hands betrayed her. "She does this," Claire said. "She mirrors what you need until you can't tell where you end and she begins." Claire shared screenshots, timelines, overlapping dates. Evelyn's chest tightened as the truth aligned too neatly. The secrecy, the isolation, the emotional swings, Claire warned her gently. "She doesn't just lie," she said. "She takes." That night, Evelyn confronted Lena. The argument unfolded slowly, dangerously controlled. Lena denied nothing outright. She reframed everything, turning blame into misunderstanding. Claire was jealous. Evelyn was overthinking. Love, Lena insisted, required trust without interrogation. Her voice softened at the edges, wrapping manipulation in tenderness. Evelyn wanted to scream, but fear kept her still. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closer. Lena held her face and asked if Evelyn believed her. The question felt like a test she was failing either way. Before leaving, Claire sent one final message. "If anything happens to me," it read, "look into Lena's past." The next morning, Claire's phone went straight to voicemail. By evening, her social media accounts were gone. And by nightfall, Evelyn realized the other woman hadn't just warned her, she had disappeared. Claire's disappearance hollowed the space around Evelyn, leaving behind a silence that felt deliberate. Messages went unanswered, calls rang endlessly. Evelyn checked hospitals, social feeds, even news alerts, convincing herself that panic was irrational. But deep down, she knew this wasn't coincidence. It felt like an erasure, clean and intentional, as if Claire had been edited out of existence, the way Evelyn trimmed unwanted frames from her documentaries. Lena noticed the shift immediately. She asked fewer questions, watched more closely. When Evelyn mentioned being worried about Claire, Lena's response was sharp, dismissive. "She does this," she said. "She wants attention." Her tone carried irritation, not concern. Evelyn felt something crack, small but undeniable. That night, while Lena slept, Evelyn opened her laptop. She searched again, different spellings, cities, employment records. Lena Brooks left no trace deeper than 2 years, no graduation photos, no legal filings, no long-term addresses. It was as if her life had begun recently, fully formed and conveniently incomplete. Evelyn's hands trembled as she scrolled, dread pooling low in her stomach. She widened the search, following Claire's warning. Different names appeared, similar faces. One profile, then another. Patterns emerged. Short relationships, sudden breakups, unresolved financial disputes. Always the same emotional arc, intensity, dependence, disappearance. Evelyn felt sick, realizing she wasn't special. She was next in a sequence. The next morning, Lena confronted her. She accused Evelyn of pulling away, of acting distant and cold. When Evelyn hesitated, Lena's voice shifted, trembling with accusation. "Are you trying to punish me?" she asked. Evelyn tried to explain, but the words dissolved under Lena's tears. She threatened to leave, to disappear like everyone else. Panic surged. Evelyn apologized again, the familiar reflex returning despite everything she had uncovered, but fear had changed shape. It was no longer about losing Lena. It was about understanding who she really was. Police knocked that evening. 2 officers stood in the hallway, polite but firm. They asked about Claire Morgan, about the last time Evelyn had seen her. Evelyn answered honestly, her voice shaking. Lena hovered nearby, composed, concerned, the perfect supportive partner. The officers noted everything. They asked to come in. After they left, Lena's mask slipped. Her eyes hardened, her jaw tight. "Why would you talk to them?" she asked quietly. The question wasn't curious. It was warning. Evelyn realized then how small her world had become, how completely Lena had positioned herself at the center of it. Later, alone in the bathroom, Evelyn vomited, staring at her reflection like a stranger. She understood now that love hadn't blinded her. It had trained her. That night, Evelyn checked Lena's bag while she showered. Buried beneath folded clothes, she found something heavy, a necklace, silver. Blood darkened into the chain's grooves. Evelyn knew who it belonged to, and for the first time, fear turned into resolve. Evelyn did not sleep that night. The necklace sat wrapped in a towel at the back of the bathroom cabinet, its weight heavier than metal. Every sound felt amplified, pipes groaning, floorboards shifting, Lena's breathing steady and untroubled beside her. Evelyn lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, understanding finally that fear had replaced love without warning. By morning, Lena was different. Her affection felt calculated, her movements watchful. She asked where Evelyn had gone the night before, why she looked tired, whether something was wrong. Evelyn answered carefully, choosing neutrality over honesty. She sensed that any emotional shift would be noticed, measured, and punished. Love had become surveillance. The apartment no longer felt safe. Corners seemed sharper, Doors felt farther away. Lena's presence filled every room, her moods dictating the atmosphere. When Evelyn suggested space, Lena laughed softly, accusing her of being dramatic. "After everything I've shared with you," she said. The words landed like shackles disguised as concern. Arguments began erupting without warning. Small comments turned volatile. Lena's voice would drop, eyes darkening as she questioned Evelyn's loyalty. "You're the only one I trust," she said, pressing her forehead against Evelyn's. "Don't make me regret that." The statement felt less like love and more like threat. Evelyn noticed bruises on her own arms days later, fingerprints she couldn't remember earning. She blamed clumsiness, exhaustion, stress. Admitting the truth felt impossible. She had spent too long defending Lena to accept what was happening now. The realization that she might be in danger arrived slowly, settling deep and cold. Lena's manipulation grew sharper. She monitored Evelyn's phone, questioned her whereabouts, criticized her work. Compliments were rationed, punishment frequent. When Evelyn cried, Lena accused her of trying to control the situation. When Evelyn stayed quiet, Lena accused her of emotional abandonment. There was no correct response, only survival. The police returned once more, asking follow-up questions about Claire. Lena answered for Evelyn, charming and cooperative. Evelyn watched her perform innocence flawlessly, understanding then how easily lies could become weapons. After the officers left, Lena locked the door and leaned against it, staring at Evelyn with something unreadable in her eyes. "You need to stop digging," Lena said softly. "Some things are better left buried." That night, Evelyn hid her phone under the mattress and began recording their conversations when she could. She documented moods, words, threats. It felt dangerous but necessary. She knew now that if she disappeared, no one would know where to look. Claire's warning echoed louder than ever. The breaking point came during an argument over nothing. Evelyn mentioned wanting to see her sister. Lena snapped. Her hand struck the wall beside Evelyn's head, cracking plaster. The sound echoed, violent and final. Evelyn froze, heart racing, blood roaring in her ears. "I didn't mean to scare you," Lena said immediately, voice shaking. She reached out, crying, apologizing, collapsing into Evelyn's arms. The switch was instant, terrifying. Evelyn held her, numb, recognizing the cycle with horrifying clarity. Later, as Lena slept, Evelyn replayed the recording. Lena's voice, calm and threatening, filled her ears. She understood then that love hadn't just turned dangerous. It had become a crime waiting to happen. The apartment felt unfamiliar that evening, as if it had shifted while Evelyn wasn't looking. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching longer than usual, and the air felt dense, hard to breathe through. Evelyn moved carefully, every sound measured. The recording app was already running on her phone, hidden beneath the couch cushion where Lena wouldn't see it. Lena returned home later than usual, her keys hitting the counter with deliberate force. She smiled when she saw Evelyn, but the warmth never reached her eyes. "We need to talk," Lena said, voice controlled, rehearsed. Evelyn nodded, her heartbeat thudding painfully against her ribs. They sat across from each other, the space between them charged. Lena spoke first, accusing Evelyn of drifting away, of becoming secretive, of betraying trust. Her words were sharp but calm, each one placed carefully. Evelyn tried to respond, explaining her fear, her confusion, her need for honesty. The moment the word truth left her mouth, Lena's expression changed. "You think you're innocent?" Lena asked quietly. "After everything I gave you?" Her voice cracked in just the right places. Tears followed, sudden and strategic. She spoke about abandonment, about how everyone always left. Evelyn felt the familiar pull to comfort her, but this time she resisted. The distance infuriated Lena. Evelyn mentioned Claire's name. The room went still. Lena's tears stopped instantly, her face hardened, eyes narrowing. "You promised you'd let that go," she said. Evelyn stood up, hands shaking. She said she knew about the lies, the fake identities, the patterns. She said she had evidence. She said she was scared. Lena laughed softly, rising to her feet. "You don't know what scared looks like," she replied. Her voice dropped low and dangerous. She stepped closer, invading Evelyn's space. Evelyn backed away, heart racing, until her back hit the wall. Lena grabbed Evelyn's wrist, twisting just enough to hurt. "You think recording me makes you safe," she whispered. Panic surged. Evelyn tried to pull free, knocking into the couch. The phone slipped, clattering onto the floor. Lena noticed. Everything unraveled in seconds. Lena lunged for the phone. Evelyn pushed back. The struggle was clumsy, desperate, fueled by terror rather than strength. Lena shoved Evelyn hard. She fell, her head striking the coffee table with a sickening crack. The room spun. Blood pooled beneath Evelyn's temple. Lena froze, staring down at her, breath shallow. For a moment there was silence. Pure, terrifying silence. Then Lena knelt beside her, hands trembling, repeating, "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to." Evelyn struggled to stay conscious. She heard Lena pacing, muttering to herself, blaming, calculating. When Lena finally returned, her expression had changed again. Calm, focused. "We can fix this," Lena said. She grabbed a towel, pressing it against Evelyn's wound. Her voice softened, almost loving. "You just need to rest." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, or maybe Evelyn imagined them. Her vision blurred. The last thing she saw was Lena reaching for her phone, deleting something before darkness closed in. When Evelyn woke, harsh white lights burned her eyes, a hospital room, a nurse calling her name. Pain throbbed through her skull. Her phone was gone. Hours later, a police officer stood at the foot of her bed, asking questions about a domestic incident. Evelyn's voice shook as she spoke, unsure what Lena had already told them, unsure who would be believed. Across town, Lena packed a bag calmly, wiping blood from her hands, already preparing her next move. By morning, nothing would ever be the same again. Evelyn remembered pieces, not sequences, the smell of antiseptic, the rhythmic beep of machines, a nurse's voice repeating her name like an anchor. Her head throbbed with a deep, pulsing pain that made thinking feel dangerous. When she tried to move, her body resisted, heavy and bruised, as if it belonged to someone else. The police returned before Lena did. 2 detectives stood near the foot of her hospital bed, their expressions neutral but alert. They explained gently that neighbors had reported a disturbance. There were signs of a struggle in the apartment. Blood on the coffee table, a cracked wall. Evelyn listened, numb, as if they were describing a scene from one of her documentaries. When they asked where Lena was, Evelyn swallowed hard. She didn't know. Or maybe she did, and fear refused to let the answer surface. The apartment was sealed that afternoon. Crime scene tape wrapped around the place Evelyn once called home, bright and cruel against familiar walls. Forensic lights revealed details Evelyn had trained herself to ignore. Overturned furniture, smeared blood, a shattered phone screen lodged beneath the couch. Love had left fingerprints everywhere, distorted into evidence. Media interest followed quickly. A woman hospitalized after a domestic incident. A missing second partner. A vanished third. Headlines formed before facts did. Online comments filled the gaps with speculation and judgment. Evelyn watched from her hospital bed, heart sinking as strangers dissected her pain for entertainment. The narrative shifted easily, carelessly. When Detective Marcus Reed introduced himself, Evelyn sensed a difference. He listened more than he spoke. He asked about patterns, not just events. He wanted to know how Lena made her feel, how decisions were shaped, how fear arrived quietly. Evelyn told him about the warnings, the lies, Claire's disappearance, the necklace. Saying it aloud made it real in a way silence never had. Lena didn't respond to calls. Her phone was off, her social media inactive, bank accounts untouched. It was as if she had dissolved the moment control slipped away. Detective Reed explained this calmly, but Evelyn saw concern behind his professionalism. Disappearances like this were rarely accidents. Released from the hospital days later, Evelyn returned briefly to the apartment under police supervision. Standing inside felt surreal. The place smelled wrong, empty and sharp. Her life there had been reduced to numbered evidence bags, love letters sealed in plastic, broken glass labeled and logged. The necklace was gone. That night, Reed called with an update. Traffic cameras had caught Lena leaving the city hours after Evelyn was hospitalized. She moved with purpose, no hesitation. Evelyn closed her eyes. imagining Lena's calm face, the ease with which she shed identities. It terrified her how practiced it all seemed. Then came the footage. A nearby store's surveillance camera showed Lena near the Café Claire was last seen leaving weeks earlier. The timestamp aligned too perfectly. Lena paused, looked directly into the camera, and walked on. The image was brief but unmistakable. The case shifted. Claire was no longer just missing. She was presumed dead. Evelyn felt the weight of that realization settle in her chest, heavy and suffocating. Guilt clawed at her, cruel and persistent. She had ignored the signs. She had defended the lies. She had loved someone capable of erasing people entirely. Detective Reed warned her quietly. People like Lena don't stop, he said. They adapt. That night, alone in a borrowed apartment, Evelyn locked every door and window. Sleep refused to come. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every sound felt intentional. She understood now that love hadn't just become a crime scene. It had become a hunt, and Lena was still out there. Evelyn's nights became a cycle of replaying footage, rereading messages, and compiling timelines. Detective Marcus Reed had provided her with as much information as protocol allowed, but it wasn't enough. She needed to understand Lena not just where she had gone, but how she had moved, how she had managed to manipulate everyone around her so completely. The more Evelyn dug, the clearer a pattern emerged. Lena was methodical, patient, and chillingly consistent. Each clue peeled back layers of a carefully constructed life. Lena had a history under multiple names, moving between cities, leaving relationships fractured, careers abandoned, and people emotionally drained. Evelyn traced social media posts, business registrations, and news articles, piecing together fragments that revealed a trail long before Claire and before Evelyn herself. Lena had been building a network of invisibility, a carefully curated series of lies that allowed her to step in and out of lives without consequence. Evelyn began documenting everything she found, cross-referencing dates, places, and associations. She noticed similarities in the stories of past partners: rapid attachment, emotional intensity, sudden disappearance. One by one, she read testimonies left on forums, anonymous warnings left in blog comments, all converging on the same name, Lena Brooks, or whatever it had been at the time. The pattern was unmistakable. Lena did not love. She claimed love, she mimicked it, she weaponized it. With each revelation, Evelyn's fear sharpened, but so did her resolve. She could no longer be just a victim. She needed to survive and expose. She reached out to former partners, connecting cautiously, verifying information, and building a web of corroboration. Most were wary, some angry, all haunted. Stories overlapped, confirming Lena's manipulations, each one adding to the weight of what Evelyn now understood. Lena's charm was a mask, her passion a trap. One name stood out, Claire Morgan. Evidence confirmed the timeline Evelyn had feared. Lena had followed Claire closely, eroded trust, manipulated perception, and then disappeared, leaving a vacuum of fear. Evelyn felt the familiar guilt rise. She had been complicit in ignoring the signs. She had loved the performance, valued the attention, even when instinct whispered danger. Detective Reed advised patience, caution, and legal restraint, but Evelyn knew time was running out. The public narrative was shifting. Lena could vanish permanently. They devised a plan to track financial transactions, digital footprints, and movements, hoping to predict where she would strike next. Every late night check of credit card activity, every ping on a location tracker, every update online became a vital piece of the hunt. It was exhausting but necessary. Amid the investigation, Evelyn reflected on the manipulation she had endured. She saw how isolation had made her pliable, how the carefully nurtured affection had blinded her, and how fear had reshaped her world. She realized Lena's method was simple yet devastating: control through charm, dependence, and silence. She had to be smarter, faster, and more vigilant. Days later, a breakthrough came. A maintenance worker at a suburban complex spotted Lena, using an alias, with her hair dyed and her posture calm and deliberate. Evelyn and Detective Reed converged on the location. They approached carefully, documenting and photographing, careful not to alert her. It was the first tangible lead in weeks, the first sign that the hunt might succeed. But just as they prepared to move in, Lena vanished again, leaving behind only fragments, a discarded jacket, a small notebook, and a chilling sense of presence. Evelyn picked up the notebook and opened it. Inside were sketches, dates, and notes, cryptic, obsessive, methodical. Every word confirmed the pattern she had already begun to understand. Lena was meticulous, precise, and dangerous. Evelyn closed the notebook slowly, realizing the truth she had long resisted. This was no longer just about fear or betrayal. This was about stopping someone who had perfected the art of destruction. And if she failed, more lives would vanish before anyone could intervene. The courtroom was cold and formal, a place where emotion was meant to be controlled, measured, and compartmentalized. Evelyn sat near the front row, hands clenched in her lap, heartbeat drumming in her ears. Across the room, Lena Brooks appeared, composed and unsettlingly calm. The mask of charm remained, though cracks of impatience flashed briefly when the prosecution began. Detective Marcus Reed guided Evelyn through the legal process, his presence steady and reassuring. He reminded her that truth was their strongest weapon, and that every recording, every piece of evidence from the apartment, and every timeline she had painstakingly compiled would speak louder than fear or manipulation ever could. Evelyn nodded, though anxiety made her stomach twist. The trial opened with a chilling recounting of events. Lena's patterns of deceit, her disappearance with Claire Morgan, the struggle in Evelyn's apartment, and the careful psychological manipulation that had left Evelyn isolated, dependent, and terrified. The prosecutors presented evidence methodically, texts, emails, the necklace, recordings, painting a portrait of a woman who wielded love like a weapon. Lena's defense attempted to rewrite the narrative. She spoke softly about love, obsession, and misunderstanding. She claimed Evelyn had misinterpreted intentions, that emotions had escalated accidentally, and that Claire's disappearance was unrelated. Her words were precise, calculated, designed to charm jurors and create doubt. Evelyn listened, anger coiling in her chest, recognizing the same manipulative patterns she had endured firsthand. When it came time for Evelyn's testimony, she stood, trembling slightly but firm. She spoke clearly, recounting Lena's lies, the threats, the psychological games, the isolation, and the moment of violence in her apartment. She described fear, love, and betrayal, carefully narrating without exaggeration but leaving no detail out. Lena watched her silently, expression unreadable, the mask of innocence slipping just long enough to confirm everything Evelyn had feared. The jury listened, absorbed, occasionally glancing at Lena with a mixture of disbelief and concern. Evelyn described Claire, the messages, the disappearing acts, the patterns, and the careful attention to detail that had made Lena so dangerous. Each fact was a nail, each timeline a hammer, methodically constructing the truth. After days of testimony, the verdict arrived, guilty on multiple counts, including fraud, psychological abuse, and involvement in Claire Morgan's disappearance. Lena's face remained calm, almost serene, as the sentence was read. The courtroom murmured, the weight of the outcome settling in uneven waves. Evelyn felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Justice had been served, but the scars, both visible and invisible, lingered. Walking out of the courthouse, sunlight felt too bright, air too sharp. Evelyn's hands shook, not from fear, but from release. She had survived, exposed, and testified. Yet every step reminded her that survival did not erase trauma. Emotional wounds ran deeper than any sentence. She realized that truth could be powerful, but healing was another process entirely. At home, Evelyn locked her doors and looked around at the apartment that no longer belonged to fear, but to memories. She allowed herself to cry, the tears a mixture of grief, anger, and cautious hope. Justice had been achieved, but it was a milestone, not a cure. As she lay in bed that night, Evelyn understood the final truth of her experience. Justice could punish the guilty, but it could not erase the damage done. Healing required time, reflection, and acceptance of the lessons learned. The past remained a part of her, a reminder that vigilance, self-awareness, and boundaries were crucial. And somewhere in the city, Lena waited, her plans paused but not extinguished, a shadow of what had been, a reminder that the world was not always safe, even after justice was served. Evelyn's journey was far from over, but she had taken the first steps toward reclaiming her life. Months had passed since the courtroom had pronounced Lena Brooks guilty. The media coverage had faded, replaced by newer headlines, newer stories of betrayal and crime. Yet for Evelyn, the echoes of what had happened lingered, etched into her mind and her heart. She had returned to work on documentaries, but now the lens she used was sharper, more discerning. Every story she edited reminded her of the fragility of trust, the invisible chains people could weave with lies and charm. Therapy had become her lifeline. Through it, Evelyn learned to recognize manipulation, to understand the patterns that had trapped her, and to rebuild her sense of self. She reflected on the ways fear had masked itself as love, how isolation had made her pliable, and how the subtle erosion of boundaries had led to near destruction. These lessons were painful but necessary. She knew she could never allow herself to ignore warning signs again. Evelyn began to share her story, carefully, selectively, with workshops on emotional abuse, psychological manipulation, and healthy relationships. She spoke to survivors, educators, and even law enforcement, emphasizing how easily a predator could embed themselves into a life without leaving immediate evidence. She wanted others to understand that love could be weaponized, that affection could disguise control, and that vigilance wasn't mistrust, it was protection. Her audience responded with gratitude and sometimes tears. Some had experienced similar patterns of manipulation without realizing it, thinking secrecy, guilt, or emotional pressure were part of normal relationships. Evelyn helped them see the invisible threads, the small signals, and the cumulative harm that could escalate if unchecked. She reminded them that nobody should have to question whether love was supposed to hurt. On quiet nights, Evelyn still thought of Lena, of Claire, and of the choices she had made. The trauma lingered, but so did clarity. She recognized that surviving didn't mean forgetting. It meant understanding, learning, and applying those lessons to the next chapter of life. Boundaries were not walls, they were lines of self-respect and safety. Trust was not blind, it was earned, observed, and protected. Evelyn's final reflection, written for her workshop and her own heart, became a mantra. Love can be beautiful, but it must never cost your identity, your voice, or your safety. Awareness is not paranoia, it is survival. Trust cautiously, question openly, and protect fiercely. By sharing her story, Evelyn transformed her experience into a tool for prevention, helping others avoid the same pitfalls. Justice had punished Lena, but knowledge would prevent others from becoming victims of similar deception. As the sun set over Portland, Evelyn walked through the quiet streets with a sense of hard-earned calm. The scars remained, visible and invisible, but they were reminders of resilience, of survival, and of the lessons we often ignore until it is too late. The past could not be erased, but the wisdom gained from it had the power to protect countless lives. Evelyn had learned, painfully and irrevocably, that surviving was just the beginning, but teaching, warning, and empowering others was the real victory.